The reason that most B2B companies are struggling with e-commerce is because they don't have enough of that culture that Amazon does.
I expect that my salesperson has AI tools to help understand my business better if they're truly going to be a consultant or whatever. So AI is a tool. The power is in those who wield it best.
We will get to the point in the next 5 years where even in B2B companies, it's expected that all transactional doesn't have to touch humans.
If I was to look out across the pantheon of B2B manufacturers and distributors out there, how many of them are digital at their heart versus Amazon? So when we contrast that with 95% of the rest of the B2B ecosystem is not digital at its heart. It's human at its heart while trying to graft on more and more digital DNA over time.
And this is why I participate in the B2B EA, because there's so much upside for B2B companies who really understand the product. If you can just figure out how to make some of that digital DNA interspersed with yours, if you can start to see the impact that you can have on your customers by being a little bit more forward thinking.
When you talk about automating your VMI practices, and the game is more about the investment cost to the return. That's the game in terms of the technology.
How are you guys doing? Mr. Hein, how are you?
I'm good. I'm getting busy.
Yeah?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Does anybody else use Dripify to kind of automate some of their LinkedIn?
Dripify, no.
Honestly, I was talking with a buddy of mine who's also starting his solo work. So it's sort of like, Jason, how you were mentioning that Shield app, right? So it's a website that integrates with LinkedIn. So Dripify, what it does is you set up a query. Basically, in LinkedIn, you create here's the list of people that you think represent good candidates for you to connect to. And you basically create it in Dripify. And then what it does is it automates, you can create workflows to automatically send connection requests to people who meet, this standard. So I'm just doing, anybody with B2B, with e-commerce in their title, who's in my list of second and third degree connections at manufacturers or distributors. And then what it does is every day it sends out, a number of automated requests, and you can have it add a little message along with it, and you can have it, send a message after, if they accept, follows up, you send another message. I've sent so far almost 100 requests without doing any work, and I've gotten a 25% acceptance rate. I'm and it's taken no effort.
Be very, very, very careful with LinkedIn automation. If LinkedIn detects that you're using automation, because I've used these before. Back 5-6 years ago, I used another LinkedIn tool that did the exact same thing. I could create a filter, and then I could create a list, and then it would send random different number of connection requests. I'm at my max connection limit now anyway, 30,000. So I can't connect with anyone without.
You can't relate to my problems. I know.
Yeah,
I get it.
I can't relate.
I get it.
So just be careful.
Do you have to kick people out
careful.
Or let anyone in?
If I really want to add someone, then I'll sort of
I'm his default.
Disconnect with someone.
I keep seeing the disconnection message, and it's
sorry about that, Justin.
I'll add you back in a little bit.
But be very, very careful, Jace, because if they detect it, they can potentially ban your account. So,
I think it's
Are you running nurture? Does it run nurture campaigns too, Jason?
It can. I'm just experimenting. I'm in the free week right now.
Yeah.
So I'm experimenting with that. I'm also doing some experimenting with a much more advanced agent automation tool called Mind Studio.
Mind Studio.
Which is very cool. It basically, you can set it up to work with just about anything around automation. And they're actually starting to create a marketplace for these agents. There will eventually be a monetization and revenue earning potential there. So super, super fun, cool place if you want to go start dabbling around with that. UI is really easy. You don't need to know how to code. It's very no code, low code friendly. They have a lot of integrations.
So what would you use it for?
So I would use it to kind of, automate. Well, actually, what I'm trying to figure out how to do with it is to figure out how to scrape taxonomies and faceted search from benchmark websites, which I've always had to use a service for. It's harder than, they make it sound, but conceivably possible. I got to figure out how to, I need to do a lot more watching of their tutorial videos, but yeah, definitely aware of the automation paranoia on LinkedIn. So yeah, I'm doing it very, very cautiously. So,
if they give you a strike, they'll often tell you about it too. At least most of the time they will.
Anyway, but it's so far, it's shown me, if nothing else, the value of just going out and doing more, just putting out more requests.
Yep.
I'm not even, as long as it's remotely relevant and we've got some people in common, people are hungry. So I'm prettier than I thought I looked. I think that's the takeaway from my conversation.
That's what you took away from that?
That is what I took away from that, yeah.
Will you guys tell me what you guys are using, like what AI tools you're using today the most, and then which AI tools you're kind of using on the fringe? Like what you're experimenting with.
Well, you can't not say ChatGPT.
We'll excuse you from this list, Sam. I'm just kidding.
You can't not say ChatGPT. You can't not say Gemini, because we all use Google, and Google doesn't let you decide if you use Gemini or not.
Right.
Do you use Gemini by itself?
I have. I've actually, what I've been experimenting with is if I'm doing anything that's sort of like deep research oriented. So I have a paid membership to ChatGPT. I have a paid membership to Claude through Anthropic. I got a free access to Perplexity once because of something that I did. I don't remember. So I'll run a deep research or the equivalent for the same topic on Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude, and Perplexity. And then what I do is I take those results out, and then I'll upload them as inputs into like ChatGPT, mostly because that's where I have the most legacy conversations. So there's the most history there. And then I'll ask it to kind of like summarize and aggregate all four of these into one master sort of takeaway. And then that's what I read.
Nice.
I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, Jason. Based on doing that, I'm assuming you've done it a few times at least. What are you noticing the difference between the four?
I think that it's been it's nothing that I haven't read in other research into it, like in the newsletters. Claude is the best writer, in terms of like creating written pieces. I do appreciate the sourcing of Perplexity. I think that's kind of a nice widget. Perplexity doesn't have like the deep research equivalent, though, that like Gemini and ChatGPT and Claude do. I think I do see that ChatGPT is just, and this is not, I think, just them. It's just I've seen it the most. It's so confident in its answers, when in some cases it should not be that confident. And I can't count now how many times I've like pushed back on something that it said that was completely wrong, and it goes, "Great call out, Jason. Thanks for calling that out." It's like it's overconfident about its overconfidence, but it's not confident about its overconfidence when it's putting together its answers to begin with. And I think that I don't know. I just posted on this morning. Like, to me, I think all of those tools, it's like going with a gut instinct, right? when somebody asks you a question, you have sort of a gut response to it. Like, you can't explain why you feel that way. You just know that, I don't know that that's what I would do in that situation. What I realized is that that's exactly the equivalent of the way that these LLMs work. Like, all they're doing is they're taking all this knowledge that a bunch of other people did and serving you up a sort of general recommendation based on everything but they can't actually point to individual pieces and say, this is the thing that makes this a good or bad decision. Just like a gut
experience. CX, baby,
exactly.
And they've actually learned it, to your point of ChatGPT. It's like they've learned customer experience in their responses. They're now stylistically responding in a way that tries to give you a feel from a customer perspective to make you want to use their stuff. Justin, I'll go next because I'm the simple.
Yeah, please. I was going to go to you next.
I am the cheap SOB, and so I use Gemini because I have a Google Business account, and I got the Google Business version of. It's not quite advanced, but it's almost advanced. But I'm able to use the deep research. I'm able to use they have the Canvas feature, and I found that really helpful. And they kind of suck you in because, sure, I want to try Claude because Jay keeps using Claude. Precursor there, but I end up all my history, to your point, Jason, is in Gemini, and so I can really leverage that going forward helpfully. So I don't see a need to really go and use 4 different ones because I feel like I'm deleveraging my assets to myself. But that's what I'm asking is what should convince me to expand mine, outside of stylistic preference. If there's tangible benefit, I want to know so that I can leverage that.
Let's come back to that question. That's actually a really good question. Let's hear what everybody has to say about what they're using, and then come back to that question because I would like to actually understand like how you guys view the differences and like which ones you would actually use for what circumstances. Jay, what are you using as a precursor? Sam set it up. You're Claude using?
So Claude, Claude's been great. Claude helped me a lot.
Us sophisticated people call it Claude.
Claude.
Yeah. Claude. Yep, it's Claude. It's Claude to the higher ups, the AI elite.
What's funny is
Claude de Toile.
Claude just actually, it took me some work to organize things appropriately, but Claude essentially wrote the RFP. So Claude, and Gamma. I've been using Gamma. I don't know that I like that.
What's Gamma?
So Gamma is like PowerPoint presentation type stuff. It's a ways away, in my opinion. So, and then what else am I using? I don't know that I'm using anything else. So I'm kind of interested to hear what everybody else is using.
Jason, Greenwood, what are you using?
I, about 2 months ago, redirected all my Google queries because I use Brave browser. I used an app, a plugin that redirects all of my queries to ChatGPT. So I don't all of my searches now, and it's like 20 or 30 a day now, go straight to ChatGPT. So I don't really use Google search at all anymore. Very occasionally, I'll want something very specific, and I'll load up a Chrome browser window, and I'll use the regular Google search. But I've also been using Grok, the standalone Grok, not the one within X, because they've got their standalone one now, and occasionally I'll compare answers from Grok and ChatGPT. If Grok had a browser plugin that I could redirect all those queries easily to Grok, I would probably unsubscribe from ChatGPT, because I find that Grok is as good, if not better, at least in my experience in the queries that I've compared side by side, is kind of as good as ChatGPT, if not better, and it's free. And so, I'd possibly stop paying for ChatGPT Plus if I could easily redirect all my queries to it instead of having to have a Grok tab open all the time.
Right.
And I also use Descript for editing, which uses AI to do the first cut of editing. I also use a platform called Write Blogger, RIGHT Blogger, which has a whole bunch of AI content repurposing tools, but the one I use almost exclusively is YouTube video to blog article it basically will create because it can pull down the transcription from YouTube, it will basically give you a Cliff Notes version of the entire podcast episode in my case. And I'll just have to make tiny little tweaks with names and company names to make sure everything's correct. Then I'll paste that into my blog engine on my website, and then I'll also embed the full video at the bottom of the blog article. So if someone wants to see the entire video, they can just click and it's an embedded YouTube video right on the page. And it does a very good job. It actually can take a sample. When it's trying to create the tone of voice for you, it'll go out and sample. You can give it a few samples of your content, and then it will create a unique voice and tone just for you. So it's kind of sarcastic and kind of, it sounds a lot like me actually. And so it's really cool. Tone and stylistically, it sounds a lot like me, and I really like it. I'm always playing with different AI tools at different times, but those are like my mainstays. Definitely ChatGPT, definitely Grok. Little bit of Google, little bit of Gemini here and there. If it's something really complex, I need to do some deep research or something like that, then maybe I'll do a little bit more. But yeah, those are the main ones for me. But I'm always dabbling with kind of anything that I see an article about or something like that. I'll try to go to the website, try it out, play with it. Especially if they've got a free trial or something like that, I'll give it a try. Oh, sorry, the other one that I use at minimum of 3 times a week is HeyGen to do all of my translation of my podcast. So into Spanish. So I've got Spanish language channels for
that's a good one. YouTube's supposed to come out with translation in the next month or so. Automatic translation, I heard.
Yeah, I had heard some rumblings about that. What I think is less clear so far is whether you'll then be able to download this and repurpose those across other channels.
Yeah, correct.
Because HeyGen, I repurpose it across all the audio podcast channels, plus YouTube, plus Rumble.
It would just be fascinating to take one video and then have it redone in 6 different languages,
yeah.
20,
especially if it was an intro video or
languages.
something like that, or maybe it was let's say it was a testimonial video or something like that, or you wanted to localize specific content, then for sure. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's that. And then of course I use Opus Clip and a few other AI tools. But yeah, those are the mainstays for me.
How do you guys make decisions about what to use when, for the guys that use multiple? How do you do that, Jason Hein?
I mean, in terms of it kind of depends on what I'm wanting to do. So, for example, if it's a task that like I want to pull data from, like my Gmail or like Google Docs, then I use Gemini because, I mean, that's just a logical path forward because it already has access to those platforms. If it's something that I want to create a written piece, I will usually default to using Claude there just because I have found that Claude is less prone to using a lot of the very repetitive tropes that ChatGPT is. There's only so many kickers or twists that are out there in the world. And if I had a nickel for every, time I've been working on, say, a LinkedIn post and it's, trying to get a draft that then I refine and it's thrown in, but here's the kicker but here's the twist. And I'm just it's
let's delve into that.
Yeah. It's Lindsay Young published something on LinkedIn on that this morning in her writing session. And she said, like, the whole point of it is, it's effective because lots of humans write that way. And the reason the humans write that way is they're trying to highlight something that does truly stand out, that does truly manifest something new and unique and interesting. But the problem is when every single post points out the kicker or the twist or the deal, like that you're the reframing that it's trying to do loses its impact.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then if it's something that I'm trying to tap into, kind of my history of chats, that it's ChatGPT, just because I started using that one in the first, and so that's where all of my kind of legacy memory is. And as they keep adding the context window, it gets harder to. But I think
that's an interesting thing that I never expected to have happen, where because of what it knows about you and what you've done, they're locking you in. That's super interesting. That I never expected. But I was in Claude. I was in Claude this week, and I was trying to put something in, and it didn't have any context to it. And I was like, man, this is weird. Why? Like,
this
then
sucks.
Then I remembered, oh, it's because I have all this history over here. Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's the new kind of lock-in, right? Like it's almost like, Google didn't have that kind of lock-in in the beginning, but where they generated the lock-in was the wisdom of the crowd and how the wisdom of the crowd shaped their results. And then they started to segment results, and they started to personalize results to where if you and I search for the same thing, we wouldn't get exactly the same set of results. And it was based on browser, and it was based on region, it was based on our history, it was based on lots of different things, and based on the things we had clicked on in our history, what kind of results it thought we would like and more likely click on, particularly if it was an ad. And so it was, Google never had the level of lock-in power, I don't think, that these platforms do. And I can understand why Google is a brick. Like, I can completely understand, because I know of quite a few people in my circle that do exactly what I do, which is to redirect all their queries directly to ChatGPT or some other generative AI engine. But I, like Jason, have serious concerns about hallucination, because there's definitely, I'm still getting that even within the response. I'm going, that doesn't line up with that piece of data or whatever. And I'm going, but you said this up there, and you said this down here. And it goes, oh, sorry, my mistake. Hey, here, let me correct that for you in this table of output or whatever. And, so there's definitely still a mass hallucination problem. And I'm not quite sure how they fix that, to be perfectly honest. And the reason I say that is because, as Jason pointed out, across the internet, there's a range of quality of data. There's amazing, perfect, incredible data. There's kind of average data that's maybe based on a narrative. And then there's complete and utter out there, and it's a case of garbage in, garbage out. And if the major LLMs are trained on that entire corpus of data, all the way ranging from excellent and scientifically hyper accurate to all the way down to shit that was written for a romantic story in a book that was complete fiction, and everything in between. And some people can write really well and speak really well, and some people can't. And if it's trained on that broader range, and it's exactly the same concern I have about AI ethics, and I've done a couple of podcast episodes about this. If we cannot decide globally and agree globally on one of the most basic things in the world, which is age of consent, how the are we ever going to agree globally on AI ethics? It's impossible, because the age of consent should be one of those things that we can universally, globally pretty much agree on. But you have some countries in the Middle East that are the age of 12. You have New Zealand, which is 16. You have the U.S., which is 18, and you have some countries which I think in Europe are like 20. And so you have this range going from 12 years old to 20 years old as the age of consent, and we can't even agree on that. And so if we can't agree on what constitutes effectively rape, that I just don't see how we can ever agree on a comprehensive suite of AI ethics that can apply globally to every single AI technology out there.
The U.S. can't even agree on 18. Every state has its own
true
law.
Very true.
Well,
it's mostly 18, I guess.
Well, and it's also when we live in a society that, and this is, I think, a really interesting question, is we live in a society that is increasingly focused on personalization, right? And helping every human experience the world in a way that, is their world, which sounds great in theory, but what it could potentially lead to is a reality in which there are no shared experiences anymore, right? Everybody talks about the finale of MASH, right, as being this sort of this touch, the last great television touchstone in society, where everybody in the U.S. at least gathered to watch the last episode of the show, because now what we've seen is this proliferation of channels and the world that everybody experiences between the social media that they engage with, the media that they consume, the people that they talk to, the social groups that they associate with. It is increasingly micro-targeted echo chambers.
Yeah.
And the problem I have with that is subjective truth. So the problem with that is that ethics and morals and truth in that world become completely subjective.
Agreed.
And that's a concern I have.
Yeah.
Getting deep here.
Yeah.
But I agree. I mean, going back to the AI, so what you can control is your personalization features. And, if AI is my secretary, is my trainee, is my part-time employee, is my, somebody that's alongside me to learn how I want things, the data is always going to need to be reviewed for completeness or for thoroughness. But the style, the intent of what I need, I can train it that. And to that degree, I'm not going to begin to say, will they ever solve all the world's problems? No, they won't, because you know what? We're going to find new problems for them that they can't solve. And that's just the nature of humankind, I guess. But in terms of an assistant, that's why I go back to, you know what? I'm going to train Gemini right now, because until I can get, maybe I'll try the Grok, because I've heard a lot of good things about Grok. So maybe I should try one just to have one, but I'm not going to do more than two until I get a comparison of the two and say, well, okay, maybe it's worth exploring more, because I want it personalized to me. I want to stylistically have it think like I think. And so I'm not going to put a lot of effort into a bunch of them if I can get one acting as my assistant really well.
My question there for you is then, and I've thought the exact same thing. I've thought, geez, how am I going to cross-pollinate all this that I've got in ChatGPT into something else meaningful? But I also wonder if it learning me that well can spit back hallucinations at me more convincingly, because it knows the kind of I like to hear. And it's kind of like, the girlfriend that says all the things you like to hear. It may not be like, it might feel good, but it might not be, the right person for you. And so for me, I always wonder that. I think this thing knows me better than I know myself in some respects, and especially because it's presented me on many occasions, says, do you like this answer or do you like this answer better? And I have to choose one, right? And so it's going to tailor all future responses based on those things I've chosen. And I'm thinking, geez, it's going to make it so easy for ChatGPT to convince me of because it not only says what I want to hear, but it says it in the way I want to hear it.
Hey, I got an idea. So again, treat this like an employee, because you're right. I actually don't disagree with you at all, and you can fall into a trap. But like any good employer or a good manager, all right, let's talk about constructive criticism here. And maybe you need to open it up to the way I'm presenting this. I want you to objectively critique me and criticize me in all of the different ways. Train it to be more objective, and a good manager. So there's a difference between, and this goes back to skill set though.
Yes.
Are you leading the employee? Are you teaching them to challenge rather than I don't. I think.
No, I totally agree. I think that's a freaking great idea. I hadn't really thought of doing that in that kind of a way, which is, hey, give me a 360-degree review of the way that I ask you questions.
Your ombudsman.
Yeah, exactly.
But it just goes back to, I try to think of the AI as an employee. And so what comes with an employee? You've got biased, you've got, all this stuff.
They're trying to keep their job, all that. and literally ChatGPT is trying to keep its job as your preferred LLM, right? It's trying to do that. So it's exactly like that junior employee. It's exactly the same.
Now, if I could get an API that could integrate all that knowledge to the next AI model, sure, that'd be awesome. Just plug into.
But I think there's a blockchain. I think there's blockchain services. In fact, there's one in New Zealand that I heard about. I went to AI Day about 6 years ago, and they were already talking about being able to put this level of information on the blockchain, and you could selectively share it with other AIs as and where you chose to, or a credit agency or whatever, right? And so I think that's coming. I think the ability for us to transport our digital AI footprint between agents and make them portable, even if the agent doesn't want you to make it portable, because if it can intercept the questions and the answers and then basically fingerprint it and then share it in a meaningful way, agentically, I think that all of a sudden makes our, I don't know what to call it. I hesitate to
our digital DNA.
Yeah, our digital DNA.
Yep.
Let me do a shift to B2B for a second with this conversation. In a world that is mostly AI generated digitally, where a website, we don't know if a website's AI or not, and emails are AI, instant message is AI, customer service chat is AI. How do you guys see the role of distribution? I have a take that says, in a world that you don't know, in the world that's relatively dominated by AI within the next couple of years, when product detail pages, websites, e-commerce, all of a sudden salespeople and that personal relationship, podcasts like this, in-person events, trade shows, even phone calls, whatever the new adaptation of phone call is probably still, my kids would disagree that it's phone calls. Video calls, one-on-one chat, true one-on-one chat, actually, I think becomes actually critical and important and maybe a differentiator. And a question I have to you guys is like, how does, if you're in sales at a distributor, I think you have a significant opportunity, but it needs to be retuned with technology involved. Have you guys thought about that kind of perspective before?
A lot. So I've given this a lot of thought. It actually came up in a conversation I was having today with a friend of mine who was telling me that, she was getting ready to go back to school. And I said, what are you getting ready to go back to school for? And she said, I'm going back for nursing. And I'm like, oh, that is a great idea, because nursing is a skill that I think will actually really struggle to be replaced by AI. Doctors, I think doctors are going to get replaced by AI before nurses. And the reason is that there is a caretaking element in nursing. People want to feel like they are cared for, cared about in an authentic way. And if you're a really, really good nurse, that's part of your skill set. That has been shown to have a measurable, significant impact on the healing process, on the recovery process. I think that we are, for all of the enthusiasm and passion and excitement that the five of us on this call may have towards the possibilities of AI, I think that my daughter's generation and younger, who will have grown up in a world of screens and chat and messaging and Discord, are going to rediscover the impact of human to human relationships, because it's going to be something that to them is something new. That sort of a genuine feeling of some other person out there in the meat space cares about me and my well-being. And it's not because they're trying to sell me something. It's not because I represent a means to an end to them. It's not because I'm a product that they're trying to digitize and upsell. I feel like there is the potential for future generations to look askance at the simulation of human emotions and to really push back on it. And I think that that's something that is not being talked about enough.
Why do you think I farm?
You secretly desire to be Amish?
Well, maybe that too. But I mean, there's something to be said about living in this, digital B2B space. And standing up after this podcast and going out to check on my sow that's pregnant, and is she having cat? Is she about ready to go? Is my fencing all in line? Like I'm touching tangibly something, and from a animal perspective, I mean, it's real life. You're dealing with real life, and we want to exemplify that from our farm to our customers in that come and visit, come and see what goes into your food. And actually, that's more of the value in my mind of what we present to our customers. It's the service is expected. All that stuff is expected. But what additional human touch or human interaction around what's tangible, to your point about your daughter, that's valuable to me, and I think that will continue to be increasingly valuable to generations that come up behind us.
Yeah, I think it goes into the expertise, though. I mean, that's when you say, like, what's the role of the salesperson, right? We've spent some time on this already, talking about the issue of hallucination and the overconfidence that these platforms have, and maybe at some point they'll figure that out. Maybe at some point there will be an AI that actually knows something, because right now they don't know anything. They're just
Predicting,
spitting out an average. But I think that there is still the younger generations know not to trust Google. They know not to trust Facebook. They know not to trust these big platforms. And that is because a lot of those platforms have become extractive. Right? They add value for years and years and years to make people's lives easier, to make, think about Amazon, right? Amazon, and this might be a good transition to the next topic of conversation. Amazon built a ton of credibility in the space because they were an advocate for the customer, right? They were customer obsessed. How do we get the customer better pricing? How do we get the customer more selection? How do we get the customer faster shipping? And they've done that for the better part of 20, 30 years now. And yet now you look at the experience of what it's like to actually go into certain categories of product, particularly on Amazon Business right now. And I tell you, I cry, I die a little inside, because some of these categories that I helped to build are now impossible to find anything that is meaningful to a particular application or problem that's trying to be solved. I look at that $35 billion in revenue that they claim, and I'm like, I don't doubt it. I highly believe that there is still, it's the same argument that I did when I was trying to sell manufacturers on Amazon, right? The millennials, the Gen Zs, right? They've been able to buy everything they've ever needed on Amazon since they were like 5. So of course they're going to keep buying on Amazon when they get their first job. But the experience now is harder. It is so driven by marketing and paid search and sponsorship that it's, I think, now very difficult for me to go to Amazon Business and to say, oh, hey, I'm going to try to buy this product.
Do you guys see the acceleration? So we're referencing an article. I mean, Amazon.
Sorry, Justin. Just before we jump onto that next.
Letter. Yeah.
Sorry, just before we jump onto that next thing, can I just finish off to round out, because you asked a very specific question, and I think it's a very valid question, which is, what do you think in a world of mostly AI-generated in some instances out there, what does that do to the value of verifiably non-AI stuff? In-person events, long-form content like this where people know, geez, you're not, you don't have 5 AI agents on here having a conversation, that are trying to be clones of you. What does that do to the content game? And I can only speak from myself, which is I'm doubling down, tripling down, quadrupling down on my own podcast, on this podcast. I'm doubling and tripling down on events. I'm going to more events this year than I have, I think, possibly ever in my career. Physical, in-person events, all the way from small little summits, all the way to very large conferences and everything in between, little wraparound events with other events. little wraparound intimate dinners and rooftop bar meetings and things like that wrapped around larger events. And I'm also starting to consciously unfollow people and disconnect from people on LinkedIn that I recognize a pattern of AI commentary, meaning that when they make a comment on my content, and it's like 99% of the time it's AI and it's very obvious that it's AI, I usually, I'll tell you what, I don't just disconnect from them, I block them. And so for me, that's been my response. And to your point, Sam, I when I was in New Zealand, I kept chickens. I lived on a small hobby farm for a while. I helped to raise cattle and all sorts of other things. So I have carried that over. I've got a small garden in the back of my house, a small veggie garden in the back of the house. I'm always trying to do something with my hands. And then the final thing I'll say on this, we have developed, so we've only been here for 6 months in this community where we bought our new house, our new townhouse. We have developed some of the strongest community friendships in this complex that I've ever had in my entire life. So we have a group of friends here in our house that every single Friday night we get together and we rotate around houses where we say who's going to host this Friday night. And then we all bring and we all contribute and we all have a bit of a potluck, and it's an every Friday night thing. We happen to be in the country. We're doing that, and we're developing very, very close, tight-knit relationships, physical relationships with people in this community here. And it has been so incredibly fulfilling, and it is so nice at the end of the week of doing 40, 50, 60 hours or whatever it is of living online, Zoom calls, Google calls, podcasts, everything else digital, to actually put the technology down and go and catch up with friends personally, in person.
Jay Schneider, do you have a take on this?
Yeah, quickly. I mean, I was in the live events business, right? And so when, the .bomb came or whatever, the early internet, I mean, there was live events were going to go away. I mean, there was no chance they would survive, right? Because you'd have online exhibits and expos and all that stuff. And, fast forward, when things got tight with the housing, trade shows took a hit for a little while, events took a hit. They always come back. And the events change, right? And maybe there's not as many of them as there used to be, but I just still think that the human contact is important. Obviously, sales is going to change, right? I think what has been expected out of a salesperson in the past and what will be expected in the future are two different things, right? So now, I expect that my salesperson has AI tools to help understand my business better. If they're truly going to be a consultant or whatever. So I think at the end of the day, AI is a tool like computers and everything else is a tool, and the power is in those who wield it best. So
I think we'll consider, I see a pretty big fracturing of transactional things versus non-transactional, where we will get to the point in the next 5 years where even in B2B companies, it's expected that all transactional doesn't have to touch humans.
Agreed with that.
We'll see that. And then I think that'll become an expectation. I think it's already becoming an expectation. And then those companies that I think there'll be interesting innovations where I think you might see in 10 years, I think you might see call centers again or something like it, where when you make a phone call, you pick someone up, you get a phone call and I think that'll be an innovation in 10 years or 15 years is live people answering the phone versus not. And I think that's interesting just to watch the ebb and flow.
I was going to talk about this earlier, Justin, but you hit on it, and it was speed to real person. You've got conversion rate, you've got all this stuff, but all of these measures that you can tell your effectiveness of your digital environment, your e-commerce site. Mm-hmm. But what about the sensitivity to customer frustration and elevation to get a human involved? Because something is amiss within the customer inquiry, the customer experience, some example of I've got a problem and the level of frustration is rising. It's to your point about call centers. It is a speed to getting a human in the loop to help. All the other stuff should be automated. All you get the assumptions made around serviceability, or delivery, price, your general transactional data. But the second you've got a hiccup in that, how quickly can companies respond to get somebody there to talk and help the customer?
Mm-hmm.
That goes back to last week. That goes back to when we were talking last time about the impossibility of speaking to a human if you're renting a car and you have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
That goes back to that, ties back to that exact thing that you said on our last call.
I was last
Feed them
week.
Humanity.
Yeah.
Last week, I was in the car. I actually talked to Sam in the car. I was driving to see my daughter in her regional lacrosse finals in college. And I was driving and I got a phone call, but it had a Denver number on it. And that's not normally a spam call. And so I was just like, hello. And I never pick up calls, right? I'm sure you guys don't either. I was like, hey, it's Justin. And the person on the other line was like, what? You picked up? I said, yeah, I'm driving and saw it was just kind of a different number. I just thought I'd say hi. And they're like, hey, and it was a real person with a real genuine like question and building a relationship and all of it. And we sat there and talked for 45 minutes on the phone and then said, hey, text me this weekend. Let's continue the call. And it was a reminder to me of like, I just picked up the phone and answered and said hi and had a meaningful conversation with this person, over 45 minutes. And then it turned into another 45 minutes on Saturday afternoon and just continued,
Mm-hmm.
And he texted me this morning. And I think the people side, community connection, is such a critical thing, which is actually a good transition, because I think that's the part that bothers me about Amazon so much, even though I know who they are. What bothers me so much, I have, for example, sometimes I live in a loft and there's a bunch of lofts around me. So it's all the packages are delivered to a central place. Sometimes the packages are not delivered. Like they never show up. And it's always the packages that don't have a picture that don't show up.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no way of resolving the problem. I think there's a button somewhere to tell me. I haven't figured out where it's at. There's no way of resolving the problem. And I love Amazon for so much. But so transition to Amazon is this conversation around there's a recent shareholder letter talking about the success over 2024. Mark Brohan from DC360 basically drew a straight line through B2B e-commerce, inferring that a bunch of the investments had a direct relationship to B2B e-commerce. Anybody surprised there wasn't a mention? There wasn't a mention in the shareholder letter at all about Amazon business.
I think
isn't that? Go ahead.
Why publish? Why communicate something they can creep into and continue to creep into and learn without have an egg on their face because they never stated it. It's a little challenging. It's not their core, but they've grown into it rather well. And why not quietly do it? That was just my initial thought, is because that was a great question. Why aren't they just coming out and saying we're doing this? Well, they don't have to. They can do it and not get everybody excited.
What's your take on that, Hein?
There's two problems with Amazon Business and the reporting that exists on Amazon Business. The first problem is that 99% of the people who are talking about, reporting on, writing about Amazon Business have never worked for Amazon. And I'm sorry, if you've never worked for Amazon and you're going to write something about it, then you need to talk to somebody who's actually worked there, because the single biggest thing that powers everything that Amazon does is the culture at Amazon. I cannot reinforce this enough. The culture at Amazon, particularly, and I think it's changed now under Jassy. Mm-hmm. And I think it's not because of Andrew Jassy. I think Jeff Bezos got out at the time where Amazon hit day 2. And I think that's a whole issue that Andy is trying to figure out how to manage now. But the reason that most B2B companies are struggling with e-commerce is because they don't have enough of that culture that Amazon does. That ability to be like, hey, I'm going to experiment with something. I'm going to try. Hey, we've tried this 2 or 3 different times and it's never worked. I'm going to try again because I am determined to make this happen. Amazon's ability to sell wine is the thing that I bring up when this conversation happens. Amazon tried to sell wine at least 3 or 4 times. And they failed every single time until they bought Whole Foods, where they had the pre-existing distribution section in place. Because managing all of the bureaucracy around the alcohol regulations across state lines, was a nightmare. But most B2B companies are not anywhere near dynamic enough. Anywhere near as they're too afraid of change. Amazon doesn't just embrace change. Amazon accelerates change. It loves change. It's constantly trying new things. Now, by the same token, the things that B2B companies do really, really well that Amazon does not do is know anything about what it's selling.
Mm-hmm.
The product managers,
or be able
the vendor
to get
managers,
a hold of a human. Like literally, you can't get a hold of a human in
No.
Amazon.
No.
They don't know the products that they're selling. And then the other thing on the flip side that I think you alluded to, which is like, how much do you think, like if I was to look at across the pantheon of B2B manufacturers and distributors out there, how many of them have a digital DNA? They've tried to graft on, in some instances, elements of a digital DNA, but how many of them are digital at their heart versus Amazon? Amazon has digital DNA, full stop. They are a digital company. And therefore, their culture begins and ends with digital. End of story. There is no two ways around that. To the exclusion of humans in being able to get a hold of a human. That's how digital they are. And so, to your point about culture, it's digital at its heart. And so, when we contrast that with the wider B2B ecosystem, I think the rest of, or like 95% of the rest of the B2B ecosystem is not digital at its heart. It's human at its heart, while trying to graft on more and more digital DNA over time.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's my whole point. Is you've got these 2 giant circles, right? You've got the digitally native companies over here. You've got the B2B companies over here who really understand the product, who understand the applications, understand the customers. But the Venn diagram, the overlap is very tiny. You've got some companies that are out there trying to like kind of raise the bar, trying to do different things. Amazon, I think, has succeeded. They've gotten very big, not because they're good at the B2B side. It's because they're getting a lot of accidental business. They're getting a lot of people who like, oh, I need to reorder toner. Oh, I need to order coffee cups. Oh, yeah, hey, I'll just put an order in. Oh, subscribe and save? Great, I never have to think about it again. This is why I'm so excited about where this society is and where this industry is. There is so much upside for a company. And this is why I participate in the B2B EA. Because there's so much upside for B2B companies who really understand the product. If you can just figure out how to make some of that digital DNA interspersed with yours, if you can start to see the impact that you can have on your customers by being a little bit more forward thinking about creating a really great customer experience, about letting your customers do the things that they should be able to do for themselves online while still offering the expertise, the reach out and touch someone kind of connectivity to a real human who can empathize with you and solve your problems. Those are the companies that are about to win the great share swap.
Jason, I think you just hit, and I'd love everybody else's take on this too. I think you just articulated something that I hadn't really connected the dots on yet, which is, Justin, how the B2B EA is working. It's to help software platform vendors be able to have meaningful conversations with B2B suppliers and sellers, and how it's so hard. There's like there's this mountain to climb, right? To be able to get them to speak the language of B2Bs. And now that Jason has articulated in the way that he has, I think that the key here is that those platform vendors, they have digital at their heart. They have digital DNA. They are software vendors. They are technology first software vendors. And so and because most B2Bs are not, they do not have digital DNA in their business. And maybe they bring in one or two people that are heavily digitally focused, or maybe even bring in a team that's digitally focused, or work with some agencies or whatever. But it's like they're literally speaking two completely different languages because their DNA is different and their culture is different. And trying to fuse those together in a meaningful way is just really hard. It's like a Muslim trying to convert a Christian to Islam, and it's like a Christian trying to convert a Muslim to Christianity. Like it's really hard. It's a steep hill to climb.
It's like trying to take a pig's heart and implant it into a woman in Alabama. It lasts for a little while, and with the right drugs, you can get, I think that it was a heart or a liver. They just literally did this, where they had a patient, a human patient, had like a pig kidney or a liver or something inside them for 170 days functioning. But then they had to take it out and put it, it was just sort of a holding pattern, right? But it's not, to your point, Jason, it's not native. It's not like, oh, hey, here you go. Here's a donor kidney. And now you can just run off, run marathons, pee whenever you want. Like, go live life.
Jay, what do you think about this?
Well, I think for one thing, I'd really love to finally know how big Amazon business is. I saw the 35 billion. I mean, it's the best kept secret like for the last 10 years, right? I mean, I remember going to IRCE in like 2018, and we thought they were approaching 25 or 30 billion dollars, and since then I think I've heard forecasts of 40 or 50 billion or whatever. How they've been able to keep it under wraps this long is amazing to me. But yeah, I think there's still plenty of room, and Jason, you worked at Amazon, so you know the culture there. You know what it's like. But I think, what we need to start seeing is B2B companies who have e-commerce actually making it work and work better and work faster and accelerating their own businesses. We're talking about Amazon now. A couple of sessions ago, we were talking about Shopify. These are all things that are pushing this tipping point, right? These are all things that are hitting this inflection point of, as a B2B company, when is too much going to be too much for you, right? So hopefully B2B companies realize that these companies are not staying static. They're going to continue to grow their businesses, and there's going to continue to be, when I look at Shopify, when I look at Amazon, really what it is it's competition, right? It's new entrants or facilitating new entrants into what we think of as traditional B2B, and that's what's going to further the tipping point. So,
do you guys see any parallel to this for like a QXO buying a Beacon, companies like that are more digital first, digitally oriented companies that have, everybody used to talk about, right? What if Amazon buys Grainger? It's like those cultures are so radically different, right? QXO buying Beacon, buying whoever else is on the acquisition list, being kind of distribution first and software digital first is super interesting. And Sam, I don't want to leave you off this in this conversation. You can touch on that, or you can touch on like on the Amazon side from your perspective. What did Fastenal think about Amazon business?
Originally I think it was a serious threat early on. Like, whoa, Amazon's going to come into the space, and obviously they did. But when you actually break out the business models and try to bring in your value prop, you'll find that there's certainly space, and the threat that they brought was not actually, as it wasn't as threatening as we maybe originally expected. And it's not that it can't be. You never want to dismiss that as a threat, but you do have to understand yourself. You have to understand what your go-to-market strategy is, what your customer value prop is. And the whole idea of this digital versus human go-to-market strategy. I mean, look at Fastenal. It was, "We are where you are," I think was one of the taglines we've had over the years. It was the closest you could get to the customer. The decision made by the customer, or the decision made closest to the customer, was the best decision. And Fastenal's investor conference calls throughout the years have always been about proximity to the customer, being close to the customer, being inside the walls of your core customers. And that allowed, again, protection from this digital space. Mm-hmm. But you do see this Venn diagram happening, and it's probably only a matter of time. But essentially, digital still cannot do the extent of I would go into, let's just say, VMI. We talk about B2B and we talk about digital transactions, and it's you've got consumables and you've got all those parts, and we've talked about this in previous episodes as well about the type of sale. And you cannot dismiss vendor managed inventory and OEM type customer applications that are much more hands-on and much more in the four walls of the customer. That's really hard to be quote unquote digital. It's not that it isn't digital. You can measure data, you can quantify that through a vending machine, through some sort of a planogram that you've set up with the customer. Don't get me wrong, you can do that, but you still have to service it. Think about servicing that. Who's delivering that? That takes people. That takes somebody coming in and physically putting product in. Now, it may change the environment, but it doesn't take away the people aspect of it. And contractually, there's so many value add things that go into contracts with the customer that you can incorporate the transaction itself somehow in a web space. But what about your cost down endeavors? What about your engineering facets? What about your all
project
levels,
management, field services, all that stuff? Like, even if through Amazon Business, even if they stood up a call center that took Amazon Business calls where you could actually get a hold of a human being, and to Jason's point, what if they put in category experts in there to answer those calls? Well, that's all fine and good, and they probably have the resources to be able to staff to that level if they wanted to. But Jason disagrees, but they probably have the resources to be able to achieve that at some point. But Sam, to your point, they're not going to do all the other stuff as well.
So I look at it as you look at how the customer buys, and there is a dividing line between I just want toilet paper versus I need these components in this assembly, and I have 2,000 different locations within my site that needs to be filled and serviced on an assembly line. There is a difference there. And when you look at a lot of industrial distribution, not maybe B2B per se, but look at actual manufacturer to distributor relationships or customer to distributor relationships, there's a component there that digital doesn't quite touch in an e-com environment.
Well, all right. So 2 points. One, to Jason's topic on Amazon's ability to hire product experts. They did that already. When I was there, there was a 1-800 number you could call, and we had people staffed at a call center in Grand Forks, North Dakota, where people could answer questions about some of the products that we have. The problem with Amazon is that, it's a culture problem. Amazon does not hire people with the thought that they are going to get hired into this one particular facet of the Amazon business for the rest of their careers. Everybody who gets brought into Amazon now has to be able to move across businesses. You're in Amazon business for 18 months, boom, then you need to move to Alexa, or you need to move to AWS, or you need to move to a fulfillment center and you're running an operation. They do not hire single track business people anymore. They did that when they started, and that's just not part of what they do. And it is funny because I will see on a regular basis them putting out calls to bring in like outside salespeople. And I really question whether or not that is a long-term play for anybody in the B2B outside sales space. Because you might make it over the border. You might make it into the Amazon Shangri-La. Well, after 18 months, it used to be that if you were in the same job for more than 18 months, something was wrong with you.
Something was wrong, yeah.
So
you were getting pulled into other things.
So that's something you got to consider.
So that's a side quest. You're effectively what we refer to as Shopify's side quest. For a long time, B2B was just a side quest. You're saying this is like a side quest for Amazon.
No, I'm just saying they don't have the right answer for it yet. And I this is one of those problems that I'm sure Amazon, like wine, is going to keep trying to figure out. They are absolutely pouring money into their generative AI space because I think that's one of the things that they're hoping will solve this problem. They're not going to invest in it from a human resources perspective, but if they can do it through capital expenditures, absolutely. The other side of it is when we talk about are there certain qualities or certain capabilities that distributors offer that cannot be digitized? I will disagree with you, Sam, on VMI as a defensible argument, because the moment Amazon invented their just walk out technology that they put into the Amazon Go stores, I started saying this is just the beginning. Because yes, it requires a pretty heavy, there's a reason they're not doing it across Whole Food stores, right? Because the amount of technology you have to put in is considerable. The number of cameras, the sensors. It doesn't make sense to do that in a full-size grocery store. But it sure as heck makes sense to put that in the tool crib, of the Ford assembly plant in Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, yeah.
It sure makes sense to put that, at all those stations along a Boeing assembly line for the 777. All you have to do is, because then what it does is it turns the problem from a sensing and detection one to a logistical one. All you got to do is figure out how to replenish that. And that is something Amazon is very good at.
Mm-hmm. So let's just, for the listeners who don't know what VMI is, and I just want to make sure I'm referring to the right thing, vendor managed inventory.
Correct. Not Virginia Military Academy.
Cool.
And so that's where a distributor will actually manage and control the inventory within a customer. So they'll maintain a full tool crib or a parts area for a customer. And so every time something is needed or used, then that customer will be charged, but they'll have access to local inventory. It's like having a local branch inside of your customers, what it's like, of very specific. And companies like Fastenal have perfected that for sure.
And I'm guessing that they would do that for somebody like a Boeing. Literally, I'm guessing that like half that inventory in wherever that is in Washington that I took the tour, I'm guessing that half that stuff on the factory floor is VMI inventory, right?
Yeah, it's not actually Boeing's until they take it off the line.
Yeah, they don't have to pay for it. They don't. They have it available to them at all times, but they don't actually pay for it until they consume it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would just add that you are absolutely right. When you talk about lowering your or automating your VMI practices, and the game is more about the investment cost to the return. That's the game in terms of the technology. But there's a lot of things that go along with that may be overlooked, such as if you have a person walking on the floor filling an Amazon machine and there's a problem. It's speed to humanity. Okay, let's go back to that, because when there's a problem,
sure,
can they answer that? Can they help with that? Are they an account owner that is able to address the issue, whatever that may be? And usually that boils down to customers. That's a customer service function that says, I know you, I know what you want, and I know the means in which to give you the resources you need to tackle that problem. Up through corporate, up through accounts, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's speed to humanity in escalating that customer's needs. And so all I'm saying is that the VMI piece is stickier. The cost to convert that is more expensive, and it buys time to go back to what we're really talking about, is making sure that your overall value to the customer from a human perspective is niched out in a way to keep you as a distributor much more personable than an Amazon.
Yeah, you have to solve the Vanilla Ice conundrum, right? Like, if I've got a problem, who'll solve it?
Yeah. Yep. Yet again.
The best. That was the best saying of the day, Jason.
Yep. You win the internet today, Jace.
Hey, where are you guys? There's kind of some busy events happening in the next 4 weeks. What events are you guys attending, going to? What are you excited about?
I'll be at B2B Online, then I'll be at IRX in Birmingham.
B2B Online in Chicago.
Yep.
It's going to be great.
End of this month. And then I'm really looking forward to IRX, because I've heard stories about it being so retail orientated. So to have them working hand in glove with the B2B EA to make sure that there's some B2B specific content. And I know, Jace, you've been doing a lot of organizing of talk tracks and agendas. And
you're doing the whole agenda. You've worked on the whole agenda, right, Jason, for IRX?
Yeah, it's not just IRX. It's the B2B zone at IRX. We have a whole zone of people who are, we're not just, and that's the thing. It's not just a bunch of people up giving sales pitches. Like, we're going to have people there in the area. So I'm going to be there. Mr. Greenwood's going to be there. There's a whole crew of people who are not just knowledgeable, but who are going to be there to talk to you about your questions. So, like, if you haven't registered, go ahead and do it, because it's going to be worth your time.
IRX, B2B Online the 28th through the 30th.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Mm-hmm. Yep.
IRX, May 11th through the 13th, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Other dates. I'm going to B2B Online on my birthday.
Oh, look at you.
A great birthday present to yourself.
Turning
45.
Treat yourself. I'm going to buy you a cupcake.
Turning the big 45.
There you go.
And
45? Good gravy.
I was going to say 45.
I'm lying. I'm lying.
I didn't realize I was the elder on this call.
I'm crossing a big number this year, and I refuse to believe
I already did. It's fine. You'll survive.
Yeah, you're all right.
I'm way ahead. I'm ahead of you, I think, because I'm already.
I'm a decade behind, maybe.
Jeez.
You got to rub it in, don't you, Sam?
That's why he's here to represent the Utes.
You've been booted.
Yeah.
Remember, I control a mute thing. I control the mute button on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I'm old.
Yeah, I'm everybody going to B2B Online. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys. First of all, Jay, are you going?
I'll probably be down there for some of the evening functions, but not planning to go to the conference necessarily. So too busy.
Understand that. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing everybody and spending time with people, hanging out with old friends in our incestuous community that we've created. It should be good.
It gets bigger every year, though, which is good.
That's right.
It does. The family grows.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time here. Appreciate it.